Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. The Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect had been plunged into chaos. Thankfully, the black smoke only affected the rainbow, and not the cities on the ground. The sudden sharp contrast between the two areas caused the disciples down below to stare up in complete astonishment. As of this moment, the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect seemed to be covered with an obscuring darkness filled with cries and shouts of alarm. The disciples down below were left feeling very unsettled. What's that? Heavens! What divine ability is that? The crowds in the four big cities down below were all gasping in shock. However, there were a few hundred people in Sky City who were frightened, but at the same time, rejoicing. They even began to express their gratitude verbally to two other disciples who stood in their midst. Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai. Brother Zhang, I have only you to thank for this. You have my complete and utter gratitude. Brother Baosai, words can't express how thankful I am. If you ever have any problems in the future, come look for me, and I'll be sure to find a way to repay you. Shu Baosai and Big Fatty Zhang were trembling in fear just like everyone else was. They knew Bai Xiaochun far too well, and when they had learned earlier that he was concocting medicine, they had immediately fled in fear. After all, when Bai Xiaochun made up his mind, it was impossible to dissuade him, and therefore, the best option was to just leave. Neither of them had felt that staying on the rainbow was safe, and therefore, they had gritted their teeth and gone all the way down to Sky City. Only then did they finally feel safe. Of course, they couldn't bear to leave all of the people they had recruited into their faction behind, and had therefore sent messages warning them that something big was about to happen, and that the safest thing was to temporarily move down to Sky City. Some had assumed that they were making a mountain out of a molehill, and had ignored them. Others had been a bit hesitant, but still came down anyway. After seeing the black smoke completely covering the rainbow structure, the group who had heeded the warnings couldn't help but rejoice at their good fortune. We're all bros here, Big Fatty Zhang said, his face still pale from fear, so don't even mention it. Like I told you before, when Elder Bai concocts medicine, even gods and ghosts will run for cover. Shu Baosai took a deep breath, frowned in concentration, and then said, furthermore, you listen to me. Based on what I know about Elder Bai, and the things I've experienced, I can tell you that things aren't over yet. You absolutely, positively must not go back up there yet. Back up on the rainbow, the disciples were all descending into madness. As for Bai Xiaochun, he flew up to hover in the air above the blue rainbow, where he looked around anxiously at all the black smoke. I'm a diva, whose will can surpass that of the heavens. And yet I can't do anything about the smoke from some exploding pill furnaces. Something seems off about this. He really couldn't stop wondering about the whole thing. He had been working very hard to control the situation, and yet had been powerless against the smoke. You know, it's been like that ever since I started this concocting session. I'm a diva, and yet I haven't been in control at all. It doesn't make sense. Even if something unexpected occurred, I should have been able to prevent anything bad from happening. And yet, the bad stuff just keeps happening. He couldn't come up with any answers, something that he found hard to accept. And that's not even mentioning the fact that my skill in the Tao of medicine has improved a lot. There was no answer. It was just like how the will he had begun to develop in the gold core stage had vanished without a trace when he formed his heaven Tao nascent soul. There was absolutely no explanation he could think of. Whatever. I caused the problem, but I fixed it. I guess I should be happy. With his divine sense, he could confirm that all of the disciples who had been affected by the uncaring fruit were showing no symptoms at all thanks to the black smoke. As for any disciples who had not absorbed any of the aura of the uncaring fruit, he had planned for that as well, and made sure that they wouldn't even feel the slightest discomfort. That black smoke doesn't have even an ounce of poison in it. As the smoke began to dissipate, a smile broke out on Bai Xiaochun's face. He had already decided that, for as long as he couldn't identify the source of the problem and fix it, he wouldn't concoct any more medicine. It was around this time that three beams of light suddenly shot through the air toward Bai Xiaochun. They were none other than Li Shendao, Bai Zhenchen, and the Diva Patriarch from the Hall of Steel Veins. Li Shendao and Bai Zhenchen both had very grim expressions on their faces. Originally, they hadn't planned to interfere at all, but the matter had reached the point of affecting the entire sect, leaving them no other choice. As for Patriarch Steel Veins, he had a relatively good relationship with Bai Xiaochun, and yet, still had a wry smile on his face as he approached. Bai, old pal, didn't you say there wouldn't be another time? Now that the danger had passed, Bai Xiaochun once again bore the demeanor of a diva as he replied, I'm really sorry, my friend. You see, last time there was an accident that infected some of the disciples with a dangerous substance. Because I was so worried about that, I intentionally sent this smoke out to deliver the antidote to them. If you don't believe me, just watch. None of the people who the smoke touched will even get uncomfortable. Smiling faintly, he gestured out at the crowds below. The 3 other devas looked down, and immediately saw that Bai Xiaochun was telling the truth. Although most of the disciples were muttering curses and complaints, none of them seemed harmed in the least. The 3 devas breathed sighs of relief. After all, if some problems had occurred, then all of them would have been in trouble when the demigod patriarch returned. Don't worry. See? The smoke is vanishing. If you're still worried, then just relax here for the time it takes an incense stick to burn. Afterward, the entire sect will be completely back to normal. Apparently, Bai Xiaochun had prepared for a situation like this in advance. He waved his sleeve, summoning a tea table, as well as an incense stick. Sitting down, he gestured for the other devas to join him. 2. Bai Xiaochun was hesitant, but Li Shundao and Patriarch Steel Veins sat down and began to chat. Seeing that, Bai Xiaochun steeled himself and also sat down. Patriarch Steel Veins was a fellow Prime Elder, and had helped Bai Xiaochun back in the river-defying sect. Therefore, the 2 of them were actually rather close, so it was only natural that he wanted to make sure the incident with the smoke was smoothed out. Bai, old pal, your Tao of medicine is shocking. You've really shown me a new world today. Feeling a bit guilty, Bai Xiaochun gave a dry laugh and said, "Oh, I'm just an amateur. My skill isn't even worth mentioning." Li Shundao chuckled and said, "Amateur? Are you kidding? You're so skilled you can transform the Tao of medicine itself. Brother Bai, you really are incredible." Bai Xiaochun was the only one who didn't say anything. As the group chatted, the incense stick continued to burn down until only about a third of it was left. By now, much of the smoke had dissipated, revealing the buildings and cultivators beneath. It was at this point that Bai Xiaochun's expression flickered. Something seemed off. Unable to believe what he was seeing, he rubbed his eyes vigorously and then looked around again. He wasn't the only one to react in such a way. The other 3 devas all stared blankly at the areas being revealed by the dissipating smoke. Although there was almost no smoke left at all, the blue rainbow, from top to bottom, was now black. Beads of sweat popped out on Bai Xiaochun's head, and the other devas gasped. Calm down. There's no need to get antsy here. We still have some time left. Trust me, everything will be fine. In no mood to drink tea, Bai Xiaochun rose to his feet, trembling. The smoke continued to dissipate, and as it did, the 7 rainbows, which had all been very colorful in the past, were now completely black. Bai Xiaochun's mind began to reel. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, violet. Before, the 7 rainbows that made up the rainbow structure had been 7 colors. But now, they were completely black, buildings and all. The starry sky Tao polarity sect was now as black as night. It was around this time that the disciples began to notice that they were standing on black ground. Jaws dropped, and cries of alarm filled the air. Why? Why is it black? Heavens! This is supposed to be a rainbow. Where did the color go? Don't tell me it got poisoned. Something big is about to happen. Not only was that rainbow structure famous in the eastern Heavenspan River, but it was also praised by the other 3 river source sects. In terms of beauty and splendor, the starry sky Tao polarity sect took first place among all the branches of the river, which was a major source of pride to the demigod patriarch and ordinary disciples alike. But now, the 7-colored rainbow structure was completely black. Even the buildings which covered its surface were pitch black, driving the disciples into near madness. Our rainbow, is this still our sect? The rainbow, calm down everyone. We need to get out of here right now. Can't you tell that the rainbow has been poisoned? I have the feeling that if we don't escape immediately, we're all dead. Down below, the cultivators in the 4 cities gasped, expressions of astonishment covering their faces as they looked up. Heavens! Who would have thought that it would be so terrifying for Elder Bai to concoct medicine? How did he do it? I've never heard of pill concocting sessions going like this. The rainbow is black now. Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai exchanged stunned glances. Although they had more experience in this regard than anyone, and had assumed earlier that the true disaster was yet to come, even they were nearly struck mute by what they were seeing. They swallowed hard, their hearts racing madly as they stared at the pitch-black rainbow. The other cultivators who were with them were equally shocked. About this time, the cultivators who were on the rainbow itself exploded into action like a hive of wasps. Shouting and clamoring, they raced off of the rainbow structure with all the speed they could muster. They were absolutely terrified by the thought of Bai Xiaochun concocting medicine, and were convinced that the best thing to do was just move away. From top to bottom, the starry sky Tao polarity sect's rainbow began to empty out. Those who couldn't fly fast enough used secret magics to get away as quickly as they could. From the day the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect had been founded until now, nothing like this had ever happened before. Before long, all 7 rainbows were completely and utterly empty. Back on the previously blue rainbow, Bai Xiaochun stood there, his jaw hanging open, trembling as he looked around at what was happening. And of course, his anxiety continued to build. Why is this happening? Damn it, I did everything to make sure no accidents happened. Something fishy is going on. Something very fishy. Terror and madness rising in his heart, he looked over at the Patriarch Steel Veins, a bitter smile on his face. Fellow Taoists, you were here to see it all, right? I was fixing my previous mistake. I didn't want to change the rainbow's color. The other 3 Prime Elders were stunned into silence at the moment. Their eyes were blank, and they were so taken aback that they had no idea what to do. It was around this time that transmission jade slips began to buzz in all 3 of their bags of holding. When they scanned them with divine sense, they immediately heard pleas of help coming from their fellow clan members. Patriarch, everyone else is evacuating the rainbow. We need to leave too. We can't stay here, Patriarch. It's too dangerous. Patriarch, Elder Bai is terrifying when he concocts medicine. Let's get out of here. If we don't leave now, we might get destroyed along with the rainbow. When Bai Xiaochun heard the messages from his clan members, he didn't say a single word. He just took a step forward and vanished. After arriving at his clan, he gathered up all the cultivators and left. Although he was fairly certain the black rainbow hadn't actually been poisoned, he was still fearful of Bai Xiaochun's concocting methods. And since he couldn't do anything about it at the moment, he had no choice but to care for his clan members. Bai Xiaochun truly couldn't have been more shaken. This Bai Xiaochun's pill concocting is even more terrifying than his battle prowess. He had already decided that if it came down to it, he would rather die fighting Bai Xiaochun in battle than allow him to concoct medicine outside of his front gate. Damn it, I can't believe a walking disaster like this has lived long enough to become a diva. Wrapped up in depressed thoughts, Bai Xiaochun hurried away as quickly as possible. Li Shendao was essentially thinking the same thing as Bai Xiaochun. The only difference was that he was more profoundly afraid. He had the feeling that if Bai Xiaochun were given enough time, and the right circumstances, then he could actually destroy the entire Heavenspan realm. It's a good thing that when he came to cause trouble, he just beat me up, and didn't decide to concoct medicine instead. Heart pounding with lingering fear, Li Shendao quickly turned to say one last thing to Bai Xiaochun. Fellow Taoist Bai, I have an errand to run, see you later. With that, he turned and blurred into motion to begin moving his clan away. By now, the only person left was Patriarch Steel Veins, toward whom Bai Xiaochun stared, nearly on the verge of tears. Patriarch Steel Veins was inwardly cursing Bai Xiaochun and Li Shendao for fleeing with such haste. Smiling wryly, he looked back at Bai Xiaochun and said, Bai, old pal, there's really nothing I can do about the situation. You, take care of yourself. I think the demigod patriarch should be back in 4 or 5 days at the most. With that, he hurried away to move the Hall of Steel Veins off the rainbow. Soon, the previously bustling rainbow only had one person left on it. Bai Xiaochun, I just wanted to concoct a turn-off pill. I never thought it would end up like this. I know it's my fault. As he stood there looking around with a weepy scowl, he found that he couldn't calm down. It was just like the old saying went, his heart was beating like 15 buckets in a well, 8 going down while 7 were coming up. Earlier, he had thought it was great that no one came after him with violent intentions because of his pill concocting. But now that he was all alone, he suddenly felt guilty. The demigod patriarch will be back in 4 or 5 days. The mere thought of how the patriarch would react left Bai Xiaochun shaking in terror. Will he end up regretting what he's done for me? The mere thought caused his face to drain with blood. A moment later, he was rushing back toward his immortal's cave. No, I still have 4 or 5 days. I can still fix the problem. I can do it. I can definitely get the colors back into the rainbow. The total population of the 4 cities skyrocketed in the briefest of moments. At the same time, numerous bitter gazes were directed at the black rainbow up above. Good, let Elder Bai stay up there by himself. But when will it end? We can't live down here forever. What do we do now? Even the other prime elders have moved down into the cities. From that, you can see how terrifying Elder Bai's medicinal pills are. Let's hope things wrap up soon. If things go on like this, Elder Bai is going to run the sect completely into the ground. The next day, Bai Xiaochun burst out from his immortal's cave. He looked gaunt, with his hair in disarray, and his clothes in tatters. I figured it out, he muttered. When black crabapple gets mixed with Mila wood, it creates a unique sediment. That's what made the rainbow change color. Damn it, I did plenty of research ahead of time and never heard anything about that sediment. Why did it pop up after I started concocting? Getting rid of it won't be easy, but I should be able to come up with a way. If I use the pollen of Spirit Pure Daisy toward the end of the concocting process, I can drive out the black color. If I bolster the effect with my cultivation base power, then it should do the trick. His excitement surged as he was convinced that he had come up with a solution to the problem. But he quickly suppressed his excitement. Worried that he might end up causing yet another problem, he quickly concocted a single batch and then performed some tests. Afterward, when he was sure that there would be no side effects, he excitedly set to work on a larger batch. At first, he planned to take things slow and steady. He did some quick calculations and came to the conclusion that it would take 3 days to finish the job of cleansing the rainbow. And that was when he got a message from the Hall of Steel Veins. The demigod patriarch would be back in only 2 hours. As soon as he heard that news, he felt like he was about to explode. I have to put everything on the line. He pulled out all of the pill furnaces he had left, and even personally went to the Internal Affairs Pavilion. There wasn't anyone on duty, but as a prime elder, he could easily unlock the storage warehouse and take out more than 1,000 new pill furnaces. In addition to the several hundred he already had, it was a total of about 1,500 furnaces. He quickly set them all up in the courtyard of his residence, and then went about madly concocting 1,500 batches of pills made from Spirit Pure Daisy pollen. Because time was limited, he pushed the concocting process along with his cultivation base. In the end, when about 2 hours had passed, all 1,500 pill furnaces had turned bright red. It worked. He knew that time was running out, so he threw his hands out in front of him, sending a blast of cultivation base power into the furnaces and causing them all to explode. The resulting explosion, bolstered by his cultivation base, caused the 7 rainbows to return to their previous color. It was at that exact same moment that the pressure of a demigod began to weigh down on the area. Moments before, the demigod patriarch of the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect was a tall, thin man with long, steel-gray hair. He wore a white robe, and while handsome, currently flew along with a completely expressionless face. Furthermore, a glint of anxiety was just barely visible deep in his eyes. Apparently, he was somewhat unsettled by whatever it was he had learned on his most recent trip to Heavenspan Island. Although he was currently still above the Heavenspan Sea, he could clearly see the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect off in the distance. Every time he left the sect and then came back, he liked to spend a bit of time marveling at the 7 scintillating rainbows that made up the sect. This time, though, when he finally caught sight of the sect up ahead, his jaw dropped, and he stopped flying. No longer did he see 7 dazzling rainbows. Instead, he saw 7 black, shadowy objects floating on the horizon. In fact, his first reaction was to mistakenly think that he had gone to the wrong sect. And yet, before he could even react, an intense boom echoed out from what had once been the blue rainbow. The sky trembled as if from thunder, and a huge wave began to roll out across the Heavenspan Sea and river. The demigod patriarch's face fell, and he took a step forward, placing him right above the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect. Mere moments had passed since Bai Xiaochun had let out a powerful shout as more than 1,000 pill furnaces exploded, sending a blast of pollen out in all directions. Almost immediately, color had begun to spread out across what had once been the blue rainbow. A look of joy had erupted on Bai Xiaochun's face, but as of this moment, he went deathly pale. Not again. Perhaps it was because of how many pill furnaces had exploded on the rainbow recently, weakening it, or some other reason. In any case, the explosion of this latest group of 1,500 pill furnaces, along with the influx of power from Bai Xiaochun's cultivation base, was simply too much for the rainbow to take. Even as the shockwave of the initial blast still continued to echo out, the rainbow began to crumble. From a distance, it was possible to see a huge crater open up, into which tumbled the structures which had existed on top of it moments before. As that happened, the demigod patriarch up above, and the countless cultivators down below, all stared in mute shock. The crater widened into a hole, consuming even Bai Xiaochun's immortals cave. Meanwhile, rumbling sounds continued to echo out as the incredible power of the pollen cleansed the other parts of the rainbow, and restored their color. However, all the disciples in the 4 cities could look at was the rubble of the immortals cave falling down through the enormous hole which had been punched in the blue rainbow. As for Bai Xiaochun, he hovered there watching the same thing happen, trembling in fear. Soon, the shocked silence in the cities gave way to a huge commotion. It collapsed? Damn it, how did he restore the colors? HMPH, like I said from the beginning, the river-defying sect is nothing but a backwater sect. This Bai Xiaochun isn't one of us. This was actually a good chance to see him punished. How the hell did the bastard manage to turn things around at the last minute? What right did these river-defying sect interlopers have to run amok in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect? Bai Xiaochun got lucky, that's the only way he became a diva. If he kept his head down it would be one thing, but look how brazen he is. He completely looks down on our Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. We definitely need to join forces and submit an official request to the court to have his cultivation base crippled. When the demigod was gone, no one would have dared to say such things aloud. But now, they couldn't hold back any longer. Bai Xiaochun, Li Shendao, and Patriarch Steelveins all had varying expressions on their faces. They could sense that the demigod patriarch was back, and after exchanging nervous glances, they flew up into the air together. At that point, a voice erupted that caused the sky to turn dim and the lands to quake. What are you doing, Bai Xiaochun? Do you have a death wish or something? Bai Xiaochun currently hovered at the edge of the 300-meter wide hole in the blue rainbow, looking down at the lands on the other side. Profound anxiety currently gripped his heart, and his mind raced as he scrambled to come up with an explanation. Thankfully, the pollen had the desired effect of cleansing the rainbow, and by now, the 7 colors of the 7 rainbows had been restored. Furthermore, the disciples who had been previously affected by the smoke from his medicine concocting were now coming to realize that their cultivation bases had actually been refined because of the torment they had been through. Bai Xiaochun realized that too, and it alleviated a bit of his guilt. However, before he could say anything in his defense, the gaze of the demigod patriarch fell upon him, as sharp as the sharpest sword. Clearly, the man was furious beyond belief. As the demigod's divine sense continued to spread out, and he heard all the things the disciples down below were saying, he came to realize what had occurred while he was away. He also realized almost immediately that all 7 of the rainbows were completely unoccupied, and that everyone had moved down into the cities below. He almost couldn't believe that Bai Xiaochun's pill concocting could be so powerful and dangerous. But then he looked at the gaping hole in the blue rainbow, and his fury spiked. "Cat got your tongue?" he yelled in a voice that rumbled like thunder. He emphasized his words with a flick of his sleeve, which caused the 7 rainbows to tremble, and left the disciples down below shivering with both fear and anticipation. The other devas hesitated for a moment, with both Bai Xiaochun and Li Shendao thinking back to how, considering the disasters Bai Xiaochun had caused, it might be a good time to hit him while he was down. Patriarch Steelveins also held back, trying to decide whether or not to try to help Bai Xiaochun explain himself. But then he looked at the gigantic hole in the rainbow, and merely smiled bitterly. Bai Xiaochun's heart pounded as he looked back at the furious demigod patriarch. Steeling himself, he prepared his reply. "Hey, patriarch, well, this is what happened. I didn't really like my old immortals cave. Yeah, that's what caused this. My old immortals cave wasn't a very good place to stand guard over our Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. Therefore, I decided to tear it down completely and replace it with this hole. This way, I can look up at the violet rainbow to bask upon your glory, sir, but at the same time, can look down to the 4 cities down below. Now, I can keep track of everything that goes on in the entire sect. Only by doing this can I truly feel at ease, and it goes to show that in my heart, I care only about the patriarch up above, and the disciples down below. My entire being is devoted to our Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect." Although he had started out somewhat haltingly, as the words came out, he spoke more confidently, even thumping himself on the chest to emphasize his words. It really seemed like he would spare no effort to work hard for the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. When the disciples in the 4 cities hear his words, they immediately erupted in anger. Shameless, completely incorrigible, he obviously wants to destroy our entire sect. It's a crime deserving of 10,000 deaths. The lower-ranking disciples weren't the only ones to react in such a way. The other 3 devas had strange expressions on their faces. However, the demigod patriarch actually seemed amused. He considered providing a harsh reprimand, but then he thought back to his trip to Heavenspan Island, and how Du Lingfei had once again reminded him to care for Bai Xiaochun. That reinforced his impression that the 2 of them had a special relationship, and it caused him to hesitate over how to resolve the current situation. After a moment passed, he snorted and said, "If you ever think of concocting medicine inside the sect again, I'll personally make you wish you hadn't." With that, he swished his sleeve and turned to leave. When Bai Xiaochun and Li Shendao saw the demigod patriarch turn what everyone had expected to be a high crime with a severe punishment into a minor offense, they gasped in shock. Patriarch Steelveins was also taken aback. Even Bai Xiaochun was stunned. Never could he have guessed that the demigod patriarch would say something like that, and in fact, not even ask any questions about what had happened. His heart began to race at the improbability of it all. Then he started wondering if, perhaps, the patriarch was doing it all because of his potential for future growth. The disciples down below were flabbergasted. When the demigod patriarch noticed how people were reacting, he realized that he might have let Bai Xiaochun off a bit too lightly. Looking back at him with a glare, he said, "Since you like this hole of an immortal's cave, then go ahead and keep living inside of it." With that, he headed back up to the violet rainbow. Bai Xiaochun looked at the gaping hole, and his face fell. He had originally assumed he would be getting off scot-free. Instead, it turned out his punishment was to live inside of a big hole. Whatever. This really was my fault, so I'll just grin and bear it. Bai Xiaochun had been so nervous because of the demigod patriarch that he didn't notice at all how angry everyone was down below. As for the other devas, they couldn't help but look at Bai Xiaochun a bit more closely. Based on what they knew of the demigod patriarch, they were sure that if any of them had done something like what Bai Xiaochun had just done, they would have faced severe punishments. And yet, with Bai Xiaochun, he played everything down. That led all three of them to the conclusion that Bai Xiaochun had some mysterious and unprecedented backers. The disciples down below were all crestfallen. They had been itching to see Bai Xiaochun struck with bad luck, and some had even hoped he would be killed. However, in the end, most people realized that no one had actually been hurt. The truth was that Bai Xiaochun, originally a nobody from the river-defying sect, had truly risen to prominence in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. That became the source of quite a bit of jealousy. Now that the demigod patriarch was back, the disciples of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect began to make their way back from the four cities and onto the rainbows again. After being cleansed with pollen, the rainbow's color had been restored. However, the enormous hole remained in the blue rainbow. In fact, anyone who looked up at that hole would be able to see Bai Xiaochun inside of it. Bai Xiaochun felt like leaving, but every time he was about to, a terrifying stream of divine scents would descend from the violet rainbow, forcing him to bow his head and remain in place, floating there cross-legged. If I'd known things would end up like this, I would have said I was planning to rebuild the Immortals' cave instead of talking about how much I cared about the sect. He sighed. Being forced to live like this was just as bad as being strung up in front of the entire sect. It was very embarrassing. At least the color came back to the rainbows, and none of the disciples were hurt. When he contemplated those things, his guilt lessened a bit. To Bai Xiaochun, it was a big loss of face. However, that was only because he didn't know the demigod patriarch very well. The truth was that the man was extremely cruel and strict. Everyone who had ever had dealings with him had been under the impression that he would dole out severe sanctions. That's no punishment. That's not even a slap on the wrist. It's clearly someone from the senior generation favoring someone from the junior generation. Why does Bai Xiaochun get this kind of treatment? He's not even one of us. It would be one thing if he kept a low profile in the sect, but instead, he does the opposite. What a pity. Even after all that, he didn't get killed. You know, I never really liked the river-defying sect. What gave them the right to rise to prominence? And what gave this Bai Xiaochun the right to do what he did? HMPH. They're nothing but country bumpkins. Even the lowest person in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect is better than them. Talk like this had been spreading secretly from the moment Bai Xiaochun was appointed as a prime elder. The Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect was a river source sect, and its disciples were a very proud lot. They always looked down on the sects from downriver, and viewed them as little more than rustic villagers. Therefore, it was only natural that Bai Xiaochun's rise to prominence would lead to some jealousy. Before, no one had ever dared to speak such things in the open. But after he started concocting medicine, they simply couldn't keep their feelings inside anymore. In fact, they were so upset that they didn't even consider the fact that the pill concocting didn't actually harm them. Now, new jealousies and grievances were piled onto the old. Soon, word about how everyone hated this country bumpkin reached Bai Xiaochun himself, leaving him feeling both bitter and stunned. I guess there was no need to be so worried about them, he thought. Yet again, he was reminded that the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect was not his home. No, he only had one home. The river-defying sect. However, before the gossip could intensify too much, new news was broken, something that deeply shocked everyone. The Celestial was taking in a new apprentice. The news spread like wildfire, especially on the rainbows of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. At the same time, the enormous battleship on the heaven-span sea began to rumble with noise, causing the talk to spread even faster. Bai Xiaochun was actually the first to notice the noise coming from the battleship. Shocked, he sent some divine sense out, and could immediately sense that the huge thing was powering up by sucking in the energy of heaven and earth in the area. Back when his cultivation base was lower, he would never have been able to detect such a thing. But now that he was a diva, he picked up on the clues immediately. The battleship was clearly some ancient magical device that could operate only by absorbing large amounts of spiritual power from the surrounding seawater. However, it needed a bit of time to power up. From what he could tell, it would be several days before it could set sail. "The Celestial is accepting a new apprentice," he murmured, eyes narrowing. "And the battleship is powering up?" This was not his first time hearing the rumors about the Celestial taking in a new apprentice. Patriarch Spirit Stream had mentioned something similar, and in fact, that was one of the reasons Bai Xiaochun had returned to the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect to begin with. Isn't the Celestial doing fine as it is? What does he need a new apprentice for? Bai Xiaochun already found the thing suspicious. 3 days later, the noise from the battleship ceased, and fluctuations began to roll out from it, indicating that it could set sail at any time. Around that time, cultivators began to arrive from the middle reaches and lower reaches. Even Delta cultivators came. All of them acted very cautiously, and none dared to enter the sect itself. Instead, they camped in the surrounding regions. The Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect did nothing to stop them, and as time went by, more and more arrived. These were people from all over the Eastern River region, people whose cultivation bases were at the nascent soul stage. Those who were friends with Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect disciples were able to enter the sect. All such people were from the middle reaches. None of the lower reaches or delta cultivators had friends in the River Source sect, and so none of them dared to do such a thing. This influx of cultivators fueled all sorts of rumors about the Celestial taking in a new apprentice. The disciples in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect gossiped non-stop about the matter. "It seems the rumors are true. I can't believe the Celestial is actually accepting a new apprentice. Heavens, this is basically a chance to rise to the highest heights in a single bound. The ultimate good fortune. You know what I heard? The Celestial is going to pick this new apprentice at any moment. And the apprentice could come from any of the 4 river branches. Up to now, he's only accepted 4 apprentices. I heard the same thing. Supposedly, the Celestial's 4 apprentices are the 4 demigod patriarchs from the 4 river source sects. Of course, Xu Baosai was on top of the situation from the very get-go. Before long, he had compiled a detailed report, which he brought to Bai Xiaochun. After hurrying over to the gaping hole in the blue rainbow, he found Bai Xiaochun and said, "Junior Patriarch, something big is happening." Bai Xiaochun was currently holding a jade slip in his hand, a message from Patriarch Steel Veins which contained detailed information about the matter of the Celestial accepting a new apprentice. When he heard Xu Baosai's voice, he put the jade slip away, looking clearly shaken. "Did you hear me, Junior Patriarch?" Xu Baosai gushed. "The Celestial is taking in a new apprentice. Up to now, the Celestial has only ever had 4 apprentices, and one of them is the demigod patriarch of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. Now he's accepting a 5th apprentice. As you can imagine, whoever becomes that 5th apprentice will also become a demigod expert one day. I also heard that whenever the Celestial accepts a new apprentice, he'll do so, not just from the eastern part of the river, but from all 4 branches. The main limitation is that only people in the nascent soul stage or above can participate. Other than that, anyone can come register at one of the river source sects. The river source sects are prohibited from interfering, and in fact, are responsible for making sure that everyone who registers gets to Heavenspan Island." Xu Baosai held nothing back, and told Bai Xiaochun everything he knew. The reason Bai Xiaochun looked shaken was that all the information Xu Baosai had just told him was information he had already been made privy to in the jade slip that Patriarch Steel Veins gave him. There was another bit of news that Xu Baosai hadn't uncovered, and in fact, very few people were aware of yet. And that was, the Celestial planned to pick his new apprentice by means of a trial by fire. Apparently, there was an arcane pocket realm on Heavenspan Island that could be entered by anyone from the nascent soul stage to the demigod realm. No one knew exactly what would happen inside that pocket realm, but they did know that there was one main requirement. The first person to get out of it would become the Celestial's 5th apprentice. Furthermore, the top 100 people who emerged from the pocket realm but didn't become an apprentice would get a special reward. The mere chance to become an apprentice of the Celestial was viewed by countless people as a matter of unheard of good fortune. That alone was enough to drive people crazy, even devas. However, what captured Bai Xiaochun's interest was not the matter of becoming an apprentice, but rather, the special reward. The runners-up would get a medicinal pill. They were pills personally concocted by the Celestial, pills that were extremely rare, pills that were called Millennium Longevity Pills. A single such pill would give a person an extra 1,000 years of longevity, and it was no exaggeration to call them immortal pills. Despite being a Grand Master apothecary, not even Bai Xiaochun would be able to make pills like that. One of the reasons was that among the ingredients was a marvelous type of vegetation that had long since gone extinct. Bai Xiaochun could tell that Millennium Longevity Pills would be extremely valuable, even to the Celestial. For cultivators who were at a bottleneck with their cultivation, and had limited time, a Millennium Longevity Pill would be a crucial way to buy more time to make a breakthrough. It could help nascent soul cultivators become devas, and could help devas prepare to become demigods. As could be imagined, Bai Xiaochun was especially attracted to such pills. After all, his main focus in life was to live forever. Therefore, to have Millennium Longevity Pills dangled right in front of him caused his eyes to go bloodshot and even twitch because of the internal struggle. How could 1,000 years of longevity not profoundly affect him? Unfortunately, his encounter with the Celestial back in the wildlands had left him with a very bad feeling. For him to accept an apprentice at this particular critical moment seemed very suspicious. Had the Celestial not received a grievous injury, it might seem less odd. But Bai Xiaochun couldn't help but wonder why he would suddenly be interested in an apprentice, given his current state. Xu Baosai could see that Bai Xiaochun felt torn about the matter, and couldn't help but wonder why. From what Xu Baosai could tell, Bai Xiaochun could participate and not even try to win. Even considering that it was a competition among chosen from all 4 of the river branches, Xu Baosai was still convinced that Bai Xiaochun would fare extremely well. Bai Xiaochun didn't feel comfortable explaining his hesitation to Xu Baosai. He simply sat there, unable to prevent his heart from racing. After sending Xu Baosai away, he sighed. To go, or not to go? He shook his head, pondering what the best decision was. Bai Xiaochun sat there stewing about the matter for 3 more days. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, a dharmic decree came down from the demigod patriarch that was spread to all corners of the eastern Heavenspan River region. The decree contained 2 announcements. The first declared that a battleship would be setting sail for Heavenspan Island in 1 month. Anyone who wished to participate in the trial by fire to become an apprentice of the Celestial needed to be on that ship by then. The second announcement was that, in addition to selecting an apprentice, the Celestial was holding the trial by fire, to award medicinal pills to increase longevity. The first place winner of the trial would become the Celestial's apprentice. The second, third, and fourth place winners would be given a millennial longevity pill. The 5th through 10th place winners would win a quincentennial longevity pill, which would bestow 500 years of longevity. Everyone else down to the 100th place winner would receive a centennial longevity pill. The announcement caused a huge stir, especially among the cultivators who were camped outside of the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect. And many of the sect disciples who had been on the fence about the matter were immediately thrown into a state of madness. Millennial longevity pill. With that pill, I could definitely realize my dream of becoming a diva. I might not be able to win one of those millennial longevity pills, but I could definitely get a centennial longevity pill. I'm gonna go for it. Commotions spread to the most remote mountains of the eastern Heavenspan River. Even many eccentric rogue cultivators were so excited that they decided to participate. Longevity pills were especially attractive to aging cultivators, who would go to almost any lengths to get them. As the eastern Heavenspan River went crazy, the other 3 river source sects sent out similar news, leading to similar results in the other river branches. It wasn't just chosen disciples who responded. Anyone who held even the slightest bit of confidence decided to participate in this trial by fire. Even the other devas in the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect were excited, as well as experts from the Middle Reaches sects. The nascent soul cultivators from the Starry, Tao, and Polarity river courts all hurried in the direction of the main sect. The nascent soul cultivators in the river-defying sect, such as Song Ke, were equally excited. Even Master Limitless decided to participate. Li Qinghao hesitated over the matter for a short time before deciding to stay put. When Bai Xiaochun realized that even more cultivators would be participating than he had originally imagined, he began to vacillate even more. About a week later, Big Fatty Zhang came and asked if he would be willing to help. Big Fatty Zhang was worried that his cultivation base was too low, and yet still wanted to search for good fortune in the trial by fire. At that point, Bai Xiaochun sighed and gritted his teeth. He obviously couldn't become the apprentice of the Celestial. How could he possibly do something like that, considering that he was the Hell Emperor's master? However, he had been losing sleep and forgetting to eat recently because of those longevity pills. Fine, I'll go for it. Even if I don't get a millennial longevity pill, maybe I can get one of the 500-year ones. Having made his decision, he decided to start getting ready. For one thing, he needed to be ready to help Song Ke, Master Limitless, and the others from the river-defying sect. On the other hand, he also needed to prepare plenty of medicinal plants and pills. There's definitely going to be a bunch of fighting and killing in that trial by fire. I have to go in extra prepared. Thankfully, his status as a Prime Elder gave him easy access to plenty of resources. Because he didn't know how long he would be gone, he also decided to put together an even bigger stockpile of life force pills than he had already built up. And then there was the matter of Big Fatty Zhang. Unlike Song Ke, Big Fatty Zhang was in late core formation and didn't quite meet the requirements to participate. Although helping him make a breakthrough ahead of time would be difficult, Bai Xiaochun was certain he could do it. Even after all the potential risks were explained to him, Big Fatty Zhang was still determined. Therefore, Bai Xiaochun nodded and prepared to help him push toward a breakthrough. Unfortunately, they only had about 10 more days until the battleship set sail. Therefore, Bai Xiaochun had to use his authority as a Prime Elder to secure Big Fatty Zhang a place on board. The plan was for Big Fatty Zhang to achieve his breakthrough either on the ship or after reaching Heavenspan Island. Then he would be able to secure his spot. If he didn't achieve a breakthrough, he could simply wait on the battleship until the trial by fire was over, and then return to the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. As Bai Xiaochun went about his various preparations, the days ticked by, and more cultivators poured into the region around the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect to wait for the battleship to set sail. One morning at dawn, the nascent soul experts outside the sect flew up into the air and looked in the direction of the battleship with deep anticipation. The battleship began to rumble as surely as if it were some ancient beast coming to life. Slowly but surely, the prow of the ship turned. At the same time, the archaic voice of the demigod patriarch echoed out from the violet rainbow. Everyone who plans to participate in the trial shall board the ship now. Instantly, all of the nascent soul cultivators flew toward the battleship. 10, 20, 50, 100. Not all of the nascent soul cultivators from the east were present, but most were. In the end, more than 200 beams of light descended onto the battleship. Among them were Song Ke, Master Limitless, and 3 other nascent soul cultivators from the Profound and Pillstream divisions. There were many others from the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect as well, including Bai Lin, Zhao Tianzhao, and others. As for Bai Zhenshin and the other devas, when they heard that Bai Xiaochun was going, they decided not to go. Therefore, Bai Xiaochun was the only diva to join the group. As the only Prime Elder, he was responsible to act as the guardian of the battleship and the leader of the forces on board. Most of the cultivators who followed him on board looked at him with the utmost level of awe, and offered respectful greetings as soon as he looked at them. Although Bai Xiaochun was mostly used to his high status, and had started to tire a bit of everyone bowing and scraping all the time, to see so many nascent soul experts awestruck by him was quite pleasing. I guess I really am too outstanding. I didn't even try very hard, and yet, here I am, a Prime Elder. Clearing his throat proudly, he waved his sleeve. Then a wistful expression appeared on his face as he thought back to the last time he had boarded this ship, as a mere disciple. Back then, Chen Hichan had been the ship's guardian. Now, Chen Hichan avoided him at all costs. Song Ke and Zhao Tianzhao also reacted emotionally upon boarding the ship. The main difference was that, upon seeing Bai Xiaochun there, Zhao Tianzhao sighed, whereas Song Ke lowered his head and cursed inwardly. What's all the fuss about Bai Xiaochun and his diva cultivation base? And what is he doing here? Bai Xiaochun unhesitatingly arranged for everyone from the river-defying sect, as well as Zhao Tianzhao and Bai Lin, to be given the best cabins. With the exception of Song Ke. Care, he shouted into the crowd, waving his hand back and forth. Come over here and share a cabin with Uncle. Song Q's expression turned very dark, and he ducked his head down further. He had hoped to completely avoid Bai Xiaochun, and yet, still ended up being singled out. Damn it, Bai Xiaochun just won't give up, will he? If I'd known he would be here, I would have beaten myself to death before coming along. Although he was nearly going mad with frustration, he couldn't resist the temptation of being able to stay in the biggest cabin on the ship. Steeling himself inwardly, he strolled over in Bai Xiaochun's direction, much to the envy of all the other nascent soul cultivators. Before long, all the arrangements had been made, and Bai Xiaochun waved his hand in grand fashion. Set sail. In response, the disciples who had been assigned to power the ship set to work. Intense rumbling sounds could be heard as the ship then sped up, cutting through the waves as it headed deep into the Heavenspan Sea. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.